to me, I never really quite understood when attorneys say to clients, you know what, take the emotion out of it, right? How could you possibly take the emotion out of it when it's your kids, when it's your life, when it's your marriage, when it's your relationship? It is so easy for us as attorneys to say, you know what, just block it out. Take the emotion out of it. Just treat it like a business decision. Well, here's the problem. It's not.
Family disputes can make us feel isolated and vulnerable. Maybe you're going through a divorce or a legal dispute about your kids. Perhaps you've spent hours on Google or have even posted anonymously on Facebook to see what others have to say. But are you getting the actual information and support that you're looking for? Our podcast, Legal Lounge, aims to dispel misinformation and downright bad legal information to empower anyone with questions about their family, their children, their finances, their marriage, and the law. As a team focused exclusively on family law matters, we aim to help listeners not only with the information they need, but also with the hope that their situation has a solution. Short disclaimer, please note this podcast is for educational purposes only, and the information should not be relied upon as legal advice or for legal purposes. All right, welcome back to the Legal Lounge. We're excited today to have a friend of mine, Evan. He joins us from the family law field, but from a different state, from New York, in fact. So Evan, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your practice.
Theresa, thank you for having me. Great to be with you. Great to be with your audience. As you know, I'm a matrimonial family law divorce attorney in New York. I am the head of litigation at my firm, Berkman, Bottger, Newman, and Schein. We are approximately 35 matrimonial attorneys. We're the largest matrimonial firm in New York with offices in New York City, Westchester, Long Island, New Jersey, and we recently opened up an office in Florida.
Nice. Well, you just skipped right over North Carolina where we're at.
You know what? North Carolina's got a fantastic family law attorney in yourself. So you know what? I skipped right over it and head down to Florida.
Yeah, fair enough. So tell me a little bit more about, for the average listener, maybe they haven't dealt with a divorce or family law attorneys. What does that involve?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I believe that divorce is the hardest thing in life that someone can go through. Nobody gets married thinking they're going to get divorced, right? And I think people think that marriage is going to be that honeymoon stage and that it's going to last forever. And then a couple months, couple weeks in, bam, real life hits home. And so, I think people, divorce, it surprises them. It shocks them. I think, it's the death of something, it's the loss of a loved one. It's the loss of a spouse, the loss of a relationship, a life planned. It's the loss of this vision, that people, thought they would have, right? Till death do us part. And I think it comes as a total shock. And I think anytime someone's thinking about the process, the number one thing I would say is you want to be prepared, right? You want to be prepared. You want to be organized. You want to take a step back and think, what is this transition going to look like? What is a short-term plan? What is a long-term plan? What are my goals? And I think for so many people, it's so easy to just get lost and overwhelmed in the emotion, in the anger, in the conflict, in all of those things. And I think far too often people lose sight of what's most important, which is the kids, and making this transition in the divorce process as easy for the kids as possible.
Yeah. I can definitely resonate with that. And because, when in other areas of law, for example, let's say it's a business dispute, you're dealing with numbers, you're dealing with money, you're dealing with some emotion. But when it comes to family law, the emotion can't be any more higher, right? You're dealing with the factors most intimate to a person. So their children, their house, their friend groups, their family members, and the list goes on. And when we're dealing with family law cases, I think there becomes that unspoken, very hard piece of the puzzle, and that's the emotional piece. And sometimes that emotional piece can almost prevent a person from, for example, giving us a budget or collecting bank statements or deciding what they want to do in terms of parenting time with their children. And it's not because our clients aren't smart or that they aren't great parents. It's because that emotional factor can almost create a stopgap where it's like they can't get across the avenue to the other side because they don't know what to do emotionally with everything that's going on. So I think that's critical. And I like to tell people, when at least our licenses here in North Carolina, they say attorney and counselor of law. I feel like they probably say the same for you guys. And we utilize that counselor side so often because we are in fact counseling our clients through this chapter because it can be very sticky emotionally, financially, and otherwise.
It's funny you say that, and I think it's a really great point. I had a client say to me the other day, how much of the time you spend is, what percentage would you put, the legal hat that you wear or the, therapist hat? It is way more therapist than attorney, right? And look, part of it is you embrace it. To me, I never really quite understood when attorneys say to clients, you know what, take the emotion out of it, right? How could you possibly take the emotion out of it when it's your kids, when it's your life, when it's your marriage, when it's your relationship? It is so easy for us as attorneys to say, you know what, just block it out. Take the emotion out of it. Just treat it like a business decision. Well, here's the problem. It's not. In a traditional business decision, you and your law partner are splitting up, or people own a company, you're splitting up. You go your separate ways. You have kids in common. You were tied together, like it or not, for many more years. There's graduations, there's birthday parties, there's weddings, there's major life events. So the emotion, you have to embrace it. And I think actually, to your point, you have to figure out a way to help your clients deal with it, tackle it head on. For me, I don't want to say it's a requirement, but it's pretty damn close to a requirement for every client of mine to be working with a therapist, a mental health professional. Look, selfishly, it helps me focus more of my time on the legal stuff and the strategy and, and dealing with everything. But two, I just think it is such a major life transition. I'm such a big believer in therapy, having an outlet that's separate and apart from your attorney to talk about these things, to help you deal with the emotion, figure out what to say to your kids. Things are going to come up, how to answer their questions, how to, not say things about, about their, about their parent, on the other side, deep down when you're hurt and you're angry. I think it is so incredibly important to have, a true team around you. And I always say divorce is a true team sport. Who do you want on that team? You want an outstanding divorce attorney, right, as the captain of that team. And then you fill out the roster like any great championship team with different professionals, a therapist, a business advisor, a financial professional, a trust and estates attorney. Like that is your true dream team, where if you can surround your client with some of these outstanding professionals, I think it sets a client up not only to navigate the divorce process in a way that really minimizes the expense, minimizes the emotional impact, but it sets them up for life after divorce, right? Which is, what? It can be absolutely beautiful and absolutely fantastic and absolutely special, but how you handle the divorce process is a large part of what life looks like once the divorce is finalized.
Yeah, and to your point, I love that analogy of a team because it really is a team is going to help our clients get through this situation in this chapter. But that's part of the issue, right? Is that it's going to be a chapter. I think I get a lot of clients who sit across the table during the consultation and they're like, "Oh, this is easy, right? It's just X, Y, Z." And I'm like, it's just X, Y, Z.
Well, think about it. How could it be easy? It involves divorce involves right at every divorce.
It's a process. There's different steps to the process. And go one step further. It's also, we hear you when you say this is everything that happened. And what we're trying to do is get you through this chapter so you can start the next chapter. But if you just ignore the past, then you're not going to get through this chapter easily or maybe at all mentally and emotionally. So we have to kind of pull you through this chapter.
100%. Divorce involves the two things that matter most to people: their kids and their money, right? So if you, and it doesn't matter how much money you have or how little money you have, like every divorce involves the two things that people care about the most: their kids and their money, right? So anytime you're arguing and fighting over those two things, there's going to be emotion. There's going to be conflict, right? What you hope for is your client at some point, hopefully it's early on, recognizes the benefit to reaching a resolution as opposed to continuing to fight on those two things. And if they can figure out that mindset early on, it will shape not only the divorce process, it will shape life after divorce and also set the foundation for a co-parenting relationship that is going to need to exist in some way, shape, or form beyond our involvement down the road.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's a great point is, if we can help our clients really get out of the rut of trying to change the other person, because I see that as well. Like, how can we get the other person to do ABC? Or how can we have them step up as a parent? Or how can we make them better with money? Unfortunately, the legal system is not here to change a person. It's rather here to figure out, okay, how can we divide things, including parenting time or finances, to get us through this chapter so you can create and know what you're rebuilding, right? To help you create that foundation to rebuild the next chapter. And I see that a lot of my clients, they're holding on to what could have been had the relationship worked out, right? The dream of the not getting divorced, of a romantic relationship lasting a lifetime. And unfortunately, there is a grief that comes with that. And so you got to process through that grief so then you can actually focus on, what are we going to do for the kids and the finances?
No, in your word, grief, it's what I said before. It's a loss of something. It is a death of a marriage, and it is the loss, on many levels. There's the loss spans across the board. There is a social loss, right, in terms of friend circles and people having to pick and choose and, going to country clubs and, memberships and vacations. And there's an emotional loss and there's a physical loss. And it's a loss on many fronts. And I think your word of grief is so important because people don't take the time to grieve. And if you know about grief, it's, there's different stages and, there's different components, to it. And there's anger and there's all these different feelings. That's also why having someone in place is so incredibly important, because you're processing the loss of something at the same time, to use your word, which is brilliant, you're rebuilding something. So you don't even have the ability really to process it and then wait a couple of years to rebuild it. You're being asked, if you really, think about it, you're being asked to process something at the same time you're being asked to rebuild something and transition on things that are so important to you. I think as attorneys, we take a step back and say, look, you know what? Put yourself in your client's shoes for a second. Mm-hmm. How incredibly hard is that? And your attorney's using big words such as equitable distribution and marital property and separate property. Yep. And we're talking a foreign language half the time. But yeah, I mean, so much of that, I'd take a step back and think, wow, his or her life is being completely shattered, turned upside down. Maybe you saw it coming. Maybe you didn't. I would tell you that it probably doesn't even make it any easier, even if you did. Yeah. But yeah, you're being asked, to watch things, get torn down and then rebuilding it at the same time with no time to grieve. Yeah. That's pretty hard.
And by the way, Evan, the mortgage is still due on the first of the month.
That's right.
And the kids still need to be brought to school on time, right?
Yeah, those small things.
The small things don't stop. And so when I have clients that are having to deal with raising a child sometimes alone because now they're in split households and there used to be the combined, one parent would bring the kid to school, one parent would pick up the kid from school after school. It's like you're having to restructure everything all the way down to the nitty gritty.
Building relationships is a natural part of life. But how does the law affect those relationships? Do you want to marry your significant other, but have cold feet from the many divorce horror stories out there? Are you preparing for a custody battle against your ex? That is where Modern Legal comes in. We offer education and knowledge about the law when it affects the relationships near and dear to your heart. To learn more about how family law affects your family, book a consultation with an attorney of our Modern Legal team by visiting our website, emailing us, or calling us at 704-286-6302. Check out the information about Modern Legal Services at modernlegalnc.com.
Fortunately, the stigma of divorce doesn't exist, obviously the way it did, 20, 30, 50 years ago. But for many people, you're being asked who are not comfortable sharing and not comfortable with people knowing they're going through the divorce process. And again, it is much better now, but you're also being asked to do all that. Watch it be torn down, rebuild it, grieve, still have the mortgage and expenses paid, right? Figure out logistics. Divorce is a full-time job. You might have a full-time job as well. And you're being asked to do all of those things. And it can be so overwhelming. And the process itself can consume you if you don't have the right approach and strategy in place. And I think, unfortunately, people during the divorce process, they lose sight of what really matters because of the anger
Yes.
and the emotion, and you're mired in, conflict. But I tell people, look, self-care is incredibly important, in terms of having an outlet for yourself. I mentioned, therapy, early on, but different things like yoga or running or boxing or seeing friends or,
Yeah.
socialization. It is so incredibly important because for so many people, they're not comfortable sharing what's happening in inside their
Yeah.
house or in their marriage or relationship. And I think having certain outlets where people, can make sure they're taking care of themselves, I think is so important. Divorce reminds me of, when you're on an airline, on a flight, and, the flight attendant says, put your own oxygen mask on first before you,
Hmm.
assist others. Divorce is the same thing. If you don't take
Yep.
care of yourself and you're not right mentally and physically, it is much harder to be there, be present, and show up for your kids.
It's so true. It's so true. And I will say, if you don't have that self care piece and that mental stabilization piece, look, I get it. There's going to be emotional fits of sobbing or rage, or maybe you won't cry at all, and that's also a
Sure.
problem, right? But on the flip side, if you're able to work through those pieces, then you're also able to refocus on each stage of the separation and divorce process. And that's where, to your earlier point, that's why it's critical to have a coach on your team, to have a family law attorney guiding you. Because I have clients that jump to the end before we've even processed some of the information we need to get through first. Like, for example, can we have the opposing side sign an agreement? I'm like, sure, but have we agreed to anything yet? We have
Yeah.
to agree to something yet, right? And if we want to draft a fair agreement, I need to know numbers. And if I need to know numbers, I need bank statements, for example. And so it really is helping clients not only navigate the emotional pieces that they have to get through, but each stage of the process, because it is a process. And often, if I'm able to pull my clients into the here and the now to stay present, then we're able to process certain information to then come up with something that is able to reach a resolution. Whether that means we resolve the case before a lawsuit is even filed, or we go to mediation because it's court ordered, or we do have to go to court and have a judge resolve some of the issues that we're not able to agree upon.
Yeah, no, I think, look, you talk about the process choices and different ways to reach a resolution. Setting the tone at the beginning is so
Mm-hmm.
important, right? Because once the divorce domino falls and the other dominoes fall, it's like a runaway train, right? You find yourself in the middle of a litigation, in the middle of conflict, things are spiraling out of control, and then the parties and everybody wonders how they got here. And I always say there's four people in every divorce, right? It's me, it's you as the client, it's your spouse, and your spouse's attorney. I can always control our side of the table, right? For the divorce to end up in an expensive, high conflict, all you need is one person out of the four
Mm-hmm.
to have a different agenda, a different plan, and everything blows up. But if you
Yep.
can set the tone from the beginning, and you talk about mediation, you talk about, alternative dispute resolution, figuring that out in the beginning, it's so important and so valuable because you're getting divorced. The question is, there's a right way to get divorced and there's a wrong way to get divorced. And I tell
Yep.
people, I said, if your kids in 10 years from now were being asked to describe their parents' divorce, what would they say? Right. And if you can ask that question and have your client answer it, then every decision, every strategy, every emotional reaction that is going to happen, ask your client, does that fit with how you would want your kids to remember their
Yeah.
parents' divorce?
Yeah, because there is a trickle effect.
Yeah.
Even if the kids are not at the mediation, even if the kids are not in the meetings with the attorneys, even if the kids are not in the courtroom when it's being litigated, the kids still feel a ripple effect, and they will feel it really the rest of their lives. But it's whether or not the parties take certain steps to make sure it remains amicable or
Yeah.
otherwise.
Well, look, kids are smart. They're
Yeah.
perceptive. They're often smarter and more perceptive than we give them credit for. Even when they're young, they know something's off. They might not know exactly what's off, but they know something's off. And I'm sure you have it as well. Clients will say, look, I want to stay together for the kids, right? And things like that. When people say that, it's also keep in mind that I tell people, look, the choice to divorce and separate is up to you, right? And it's not a decision to make lightly. Once you sort of, ring the bell, you can't unring it.
Mhm.
But staying in a relationship or marriage that is loveless, that there's no affection, kids see that too. So when people say, I want to stay together for the kids, you know, is that the type of behavior you want your kids to see their parents showing absolutely zero signs of affection, right? So I think
Mhm.
thinking about the kids, whether to stay in a marriage, stay in a relationship, or separating and divorcing, and what that process looks like on them, if you can keep the kids at the forefront of every single decision you make, I think there's a real opportunity to not only divorce in the right way, but to
Mhm.
develop the foundation for a pretty healthy co-parenting relationship going forward.
And that's critical, right? Because
Well,
I like to say that parents are the number one example for their children of how people should interact. And if parents stay together for the kids, quote unquote, but they're constantly fighting, then you're telling the kids, oh, this is how a
no,
happy, healthy relationship looks. And I mean, personally, I would say I don't know if that is the healthiest, right? Because kids should not learn that yelling at one another or demeaning one another, or, and the list goes on, all
sure.
these negative behaviors is part of a healthy relationship, marital or otherwise, right? Because then the children are going to embody what they see in the home and replicate it on the playground, in the classroom, with their own relationships, with their own friendships. And so if a healthier example is created by separating the parents, then that is an option that everyone should entertain for the children to really embody a better example for them.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. And part of what happens, and you know this because you see it, during a contested divorce, the kids are just front and center. And everybody says, I want to do what's best for the kids. But really, what the underlining position in what most people want is what's best for them. So
Yep.
people lose. I want a certain parenting schedule, right? Because I want to see the kids, or I want that. If you listen to what people say, it's what's best for that individual, the parent, not what's best for the kids. Because if we're really talking about what's best for the kids, certain basic concepts would always be prioritized: consistency, stability, right? Things like that, you know. But people want certain things that because they want it. They want optically to say they have X percent of time with their kids, or they have a certain parenting agreement or custody schedule on paper. But if you take a step back and you consult with, a mental health professional or different professionals, right? How many people take the time to say, look, is this really going to work for our family, our kids who may or may not have certain needs or activities or sports? And you have a parent or both parents who might work 8 in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. Like, what makes sense for us, right? And part of it, it's hard because every client knows someone who's going through a divorce, right? And you hear all sorts of things. Well, my friend got X amount of money, or my friend got this house or this vacation home, or my friend has this particular parenting or custody schedule. What about me? And part of it is, well, every family is different. Every kid is different. Every kid's needs are different. Maybe in that situation, there was X amount of dollars, or in that situation, money was no object, or, the kids had certain special needs, like whatever. Everyone's different. And so you're always facing everyone, likes playing Monday morning quarterback when it comes to, second guessing decisions that are made or what agreements are. But the thing I've learned over the years, every family is different. Every family is unique, and there's no cookie cutter approach to resolving any divorce.
And then I'll add a layer on top of that. Every jurisdiction is different because I
Exactly.
know you guys up north and in Florida, you have a completely different child support calculator than we do here in North Carolina. And so when I have a client, and this recently happened, they were like, well, my cousin in New Jersey got X amount in child support through beyond high school. And I was like, well, you're not in New Jersey.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
you're in North Carolina. It's a different set of laws.
And we saw that a lot during the pandemic, 6 years out now, but people were leaving New York, headed down to North Carolina, headed down to Florida, for job opportunities, working remotely. They ended up staying there or getting divorced. Like, there were all sorts of jurisdictionals that came through, but it's so fascinating, especially when I speak to brilliant attorneys like yourself, just learning about, the different, laws and the statutes and just the similarities, but also differences between the family law practice here in New York and also North Carolina. Like, I think it is just absolutely fascinating whether child support goes to 18 or 21, which is, what it is in New York, or, in New York, even if, the child support doesn't adjust based on the parenting schedule, meaning if a parent has 5% of the time with the kids, or 49% of the time, the child support obligation is the same, right? So, there's different laws and statutes, which, that is the, nerd law side of me that I absolutely love, talking about and thinking about, because I just think it's, obviously we all have the similarities with the emotion and, the playing the role of therapist and things like that. But the actual laws are so different state to state. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and I guess for the listener, I just want to point this out because, when I say, hey, call Evan when you're in New York, it's not because I don't want to work with you. It's because you, Evan, know the law a lot better. Oh, and you're licensed there, by the way. I am not. And the laws are different in North Carolina. And then, I had recently had a case where we were transferring the whole family from here in North Carolina to California. And there was this push and pull where, we want to release child custody to California, but strategically, we didn't want to release child support because child support, we just wanted the North Carolina calculator to apply. Yeah. And so speaking of your earlier point of strategy, that's where, again, you really want a good family law attorney as your team captain to figure out which pieces you want to play or not play, especially if you have this interstate situation.
Yeah, and that's why having like a good network of professionals is so important. Right. Even in the family law context, like to your point, I'm not licensed in North Carolina, but I know that if I have anyone going through a separation, divorce, needs a prenup, like you're my person. Right. Yeah. I don't know North Carolina law. I'm not going to pretend I know North Carolina law. Sure, I can speak the language. I can speak the lingo. I know enough to have a conversation with you, but I'm not going to play North Carolina divorce attorney. That's not my jurisdiction. That's not my area. I'm not licensed there. But having that network of people and professionals that you can rely on, you can work with, you can collaborate, and it's better for the client. Like that's the beauty of what we do.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's how we can serve our communities better so that hopefully, yes, I don't know if we'll ever have a great impact on the divorce rate itself, but if we can at least make the divorce process more palatable and more amicable, I think that's part of the role we're taking on when we say we're going to help a client and help a family.
No, 100% agree. And part of it is, like to your point, Theresa, which is great. We are counselors. Like, sure, we advocate, right? But we're counselors. And like, if you take a step back and think about what is your role, right? You're helping navigate someone through, as I said before, the most challenging time in their life, right? Mm-hmm. And that is an incredible responsibility, right? And you're helping them over, it could be 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, and then they're going to figure it out, right? You're setting people up with other professionals, estate planning attorneys, wealth managers, people who are going to be in their lives much longer than obviously you as the divorce attorney. But it is so incredibly rewarding when I receive holiday cards or notes from clients 10 years down the road, and I haven't spoken to them in a handful of years, and I say, Evan, you were right. I'm okay. I'm remarried. Couldn't be happier. My son, who was 7 at the time, is now 22, and he's doing incredible. And like, those are the things, the cards and the emails, like, that is awesome. Like, that is so incredibly rewarding when you can see the feel-good story and like, at the time, and I tell people, look, you might not see it when you're in the thick of it, that things are going to be okay. But if you trust the process and if you handle things a certain way, you are going to set yourself up to be one of those success stories that, like, and divorce doesn't have to be bad. I think for so many years it was divorce equals failure. That's not true. Like, you separate, you get divorced. At the end of the day, like, people are living longer than ever before in their 80s and 90s and 100. People want and deserve to be happy, right? And so you might have, be married 20 years and raise a couple kids. And you know what? You fell out of love, and that's okay. We don't have to think about divorce as a failure or treat it as a failure. It was a chapter. It was a time period. It came, it ended. And you know what? That next chapter is going to be absolutely fantastic.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That was fantastic. But it's true. It's like there is a light at the end of the tunnel, even if you can't see the light yet, and you're not alone. Like that's
You're not alone.
literally why we're here, why our entire teams are here for our clients. But speaking of thank you cards, I just happen to have like them like right behind me as you're saying
I
that.
see. I see you have a few right behind you.
Yeah, and it's amazing because, to your point, we are meant to be in someone's life temporarily, but we're also in someone's life in the thick of it. And there are things that our clients will share with us that they may not even tell their mom or their best friend. Like they are so intimately intertwined with us for a very deep, there's a depth to it. It may not be lengthy necessarily, but there's a depth to that relationship. But then on the flip side, it's, when you see the birdie fly from the nest, if you will, it's like, yes, I helped them get there, despite the turmoils or mudslinging that happened along the way.
Yeah, you think about it for a second. Client comes in, consultation, they sit across from you. You don't know them, they don't know you. And yet you expect them to share with you their deepest, darkest secrets about everything, right? Their marriage, their relationships, what happens in the bed. Like think of it. You're sharing with essentially a stranger. Life's goods, life's bads, like the darkest secrets, every skeleton that exists. That is such an interesting dynamic and an interesting relationship. But I think that also speaks to the importance of the attorney-client relationship, like hiring the right person, hiring the right, fit. I always say that who you hire as your attorney is probably one of the most important relationships that you will ever enter into, because what that person is dealing with on your behalf, the time period, dealing with you in sort of this state where there's good days and a lot of bad days. But, it speaks volumes to how important that attorney-client relationship is.
It's so true. It's so true. Well, we could definitely keep talking all day, especially about our passionate work with our clients. But before I let you go, Evan, where can a listener find you if they're looking for you and your team?
Yeah, Theresa, thank you. This was absolutely fantastic. And you're right. We can talk for hours. So the firm is Berkman, Bottger, Newman, Schein. The website is berkbot.com. Someone can reach out by phone, email. My email is my last name, Schein @berkbot.com. Reach out if anyone has any questions or thinking about divorce or prenups or anything that fits within the family law context and field. Happy to answer, any questions. And that's where people can find me.
And don't you also have a podcast, if I say so myself?
I do, the Schein On podcast, 6th season, and we got to have you on. It's, I absolutely, love it. It started as a passion project, and, now, it's turned into something really great, with a great community, great, audience. And thank you for bringing that up.
No problem. Well, to all the listeners, check out Evan's podcast, as well as we'll see you next time here on the Legal Lounge.
Thanks, Theresa.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion. To learn more about me and the Modern Legal team, go to our website, modernlegalnc.com, or check out the links in our show notes to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also call us at 704-286-6302. If you have been intrigued by the conversation and would like us to continue our discussions, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. See you next time.